you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm well. Sleepy, but
Hmm.
pretty well.
That's a beautiful bookcase behind you. I can only imagine the wisdom that must be collected there.
I I love my books. It's let me see, it's Tarot and Kabbalah and dreams and angels and magic. Yeah, yeah, Western mysteries.
Hmm. Beautiful.
Astrology's over there.
So, are they organized by topic then?
Yeah, they are.
Hmm.
Yeah. I and they're condensed. I started out with like, oh, a house that had about five bookcases in every room, and I sold a bunch of my books when I moved here. I just couldn't move that many books, you know. And I thought, well, I've done a lot of writing. I'm 70. I'm not going to do much more. And of course, I'm writing things again, going, damn, I wish I had that book. So, oh well, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, those of us who adore books, we're almost in this age a kind of a different species, right?
Yeah, we are.
We are the old guard.
Yeah. Yeah. I have I won't say love hate relationship with AI. I use it for research sometimes, but I can't trust it.
Mhm.
So.
It's very strange to live in the age that we live in. Many of us, when we were children, we saw images of things like talking computers and, you know, things with which we could instantly communicate with each other. And we
Right,
we marveled at the possibilities. And I think there was a promise of a utopian world where war and disease and poverty and, I don't know, kleptocracy had been leashed, but instead it looks like the dystopian opposite mostly.
yeah, yeah. Where there's a will, there's a person willing to fuck it up.
Yeah, I find my present relationship with technology extremely ironic. I was, as a child, absolutely fascinated by devices, and I grew up serving them, and I was a computer technician for many
Uh,
years. And now it's such a strange difference. I believe in, no, believe is the wrong word. I adore living beings. Um, and and so that puts me in direct opposition to to the
right,
human, the sort of collective human um, fascination with machines, right?
right,
Um,
right. Well, while we're on this topic, I want to show you something
by all means.
because it's one of the most amazing photographs that was ever made of me sitting inside a temple. And it was taken about 20 years ago. I was meditating in front of the statue of Horus at the temple at Food, which is where the library of Sechet is. And Sechet is the goddess. I did this deck of cards. I don't know if you can see that with her. Yeah, but this is the picture. See if I can hold that up for you. Can you see that?
Nice and still. So what I see is a bunch of, I see you and oh my goodness, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but there's a bunch of, definitely these are not artifacts of the camera. This
Mm-mm.
is like a spiritual anatomy in light shadows or something, yeah?
Right, right. Right here, over here where I'm pointing, there's a very tall individual with very long braided hair. It looks like wearing a long robe, like a priest. over here is, you can see the face of the hawk god. Behind him, you see Osiris. And there are a number of other, as I look at it, there are a number of other beings that show up. And people will look at that photograph and say, that's AI. And it isn't. You know, it really happened. I was sitting there meditating. A person took my picture. In fact, he took several pictures, but on only one of them did all of that show up.
What were your thoughts when you saw, what were your first thoughts when you saw that image for the first time, I wonder?
I thought, thank you. I mean, because I have always felt the presence. That's a very strong temple, and I tell the people who go with me when we go in there, I said, this is the only complete temple that you'll ever see that has all of the working parts. It's got the library, it's got the purification room, it has the rooms for the musicians and all the writings, it has healing rooms with, written on the walls, it has particular um, concoctions, I'll call them. Not some people call them spells, but I'll say, they're mix and match kind of music, vibration. Um, yeah, and then there's all the prayers, and on each side there's stairs going up to the top of the temple. And you can see images of the priests and priestesses dancing and holding the statues and going up to the roof. There's a zodiac. It's just amazing. It's one of my favorite temples. And it was where uh, Hathor and Horus would have their joyful meeting. That was like the marriage temple. And so I remember sitting there thinking, okay, Horus, I'm here. I'm your Hathor. And that was what I was doing when I was meditating there. And he showed up. I was like, oh, it was cool.
Oh, wow. It's very common when we uh, have the privilege of meeting someone whose spirit and life is so beautiful as yours to be a little bit overwhelmed, like emotionally. And I had to kind of check myself because as you were telling that story, like I choked up, and I didn't want to just start crying because that would be
I choke
indecorous.
up when I tell this story sometimes. Yeah. it's it is so much of an honor to be touched by the divine in any part of our lifetime, you
It's
know.
true. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to show you that picture.
I'm so grateful that you did. It's beautiful, and I never for a moment doubted its authenticity. This is a sort of plague of modernity is that we images were all it was always possible to counterfeit images in various ways. But now it's possible to instantly counterfeit them in ways that are extremely difficult for ordinary people to discern, right?
Right, right,
Um, and this is very dangerous because, well, there's all kinds of reasons, but I study human cognition awareness and particularly how we relate with concepts and objects. And there are a variety of fundamental vulnerabilities for us humans. But one of them is that anything that affects what we make determinations with, how we measure, we cannot detect that because it's affecting what we detect with. Right.
right,
So there's a fundamental vulnerability there that in modernity is ever more consistently being captured and weaponized, right?
right. Weaponized is the scary part.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You know, I have so many questions for you. I've always had a sort of two kind of fundamental, um, what is the right word? Affinities. Yeah. And one is for the kestrel, which you can see in an image here that was drawn by,
Yes.
even though it's you know, you can't see it clearly, um, by a young woman I know named Meta Hoffner. And it's just an incredibly beautiful image. I won't drag it to the camera at the moment. But yes, I always had an affinity for hawks. But even before that, when I was a child, we had a statue of Nefertiti on top of the television. And I became fascinated very early on without really understanding why by scarabs, and used to wear one as a kid. And was lucky enough when I was 10 at the local Radio Shack, there was a Book of the Dead geek who worked at the Radio Shack. And we used to have long conversations. And of course, back then, only Wallace Budge's probably
Was
terrible.
available. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
probably terrible translation was available. But I read that thing from cover to cover and was fascinated with ancient Egypt. Um, I have so many questions and I'm nervous and I'm excited. I just want to take a moment to honor you and your work, your ancestors, and the beings who have been your teachers and guides and companions. You are the kind of a human being that I think has become somewhat like an angel, right?
Oh,
In the sense of like the many beings, they know you will listen, they know
yeah.
you will speak, they know you will live virtuously and beautifully. And so they naturally find you and you become this sort of human vessel for their appearance within the modern world. What an incredibly beautiful way to be human. I just
Oh,
I just honor
gosh, Darren,
those.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I feel so honored to have been visited by angels, by divine beings from the etheric world. There was a word in ancient Egypt that meant both the dream time, meditation, and the place where we go after we die, and they're all the same space, and it's all consciousness. That's what it is. And so it's very easy once you understand that to tap into that and to feel that you're a part of it, that you're there. Um, Now the Duat is more like the underworld, but this is it's called the Aket, and it's light land, and it's the astral world. Yeah.
I have some familiarity with these matters, not from research, but from direct experience. Um, I had a very, now so many years later, I'm confused and puzzled and a regular human again. But for a time in 2002, there was another intelligence with me. And
Mm.
it, I, it was with my mind all the time and could simply reshape my awareness to match what it was aware of.
Wow.
So I had non-human experience all day long. And it was like being in a school, right? It was just,
How did that happen?
um, the true answer is I don't know. Um, I have, just like any human might, right? We form post hoc explanations, but the entire experience was so far beyond anything I ever imagined possible. I had hoped that such an experience might be possible, but I had no idea how to catalyze it or,
Right.
turn the ignition switch. And I was writing about problems. I was trying to solve the problem of like what's broken in our species. Right? Why is there cruelty? Why is there war? Why
Right.
is there injustice? Right? I had a passionate um, concern with these matters, and there were two events. One took place a couple years prior to what happened, where I was taken over and writing madly for a couple of hours, like nothing I'd ever done before. And the
Mhm.
first time, the document was lost. about 150 pages in, I'll leave the story aside, but the document disappeared. Not magically, really, although it was a weird situation. And then in 2002, in May, the very similar inspiration took me over. I started writing, and I imagined for the first time that human minds were like an environment, right? A
Mhm,
place, if you will.
mhm.
And then I saw that there was something like organisms, but much more domineering, that live in that network. And when I went in my imagination to invent a word for the connections in the network, there was a light in my mind. There's never been a light in my mind. And it began teaching me using a geometric progression of a dot that becomes a line, that becomes a cross, that becomes a disc, that becomes a sphere. And there's a final position that's sort of transcendental to that. And that was the beginning. I still don't understand entirely what was going on. I think human understanding, especially conceptual understanding, we make more of it than we should, right?
Yeah.
Our hearts and our souls are capable of forms of awareness that don't fit in thought. They are
Mhm.
transcendental to language, to concepts and thinking. And of course, you know, in hindsight, I wonder, did I make terrible mistakes? Did I get it wrong? Why did my teacher go away? And I think of it as an angel. Um,
Yeah.
and it would be very tricky about answering questions of identity, right? If I said, "Who are you?" Right, it would show me images of historical places, like particularly Egypt, um, Mesopotamia, Africa, South America, and it would say like, here they called me Toth, here they called me this, right? I am not, but I'm not a thing. I'm
Right.
not a, my identity is not, it's not delineated.
When you were describing it, I thought, I thought of the way he made the universe with his geometric shapes. And he's like stirring his cauldron, and he says, first I was one, and then I was two, and then I was four, and then I was eight, and then I was one again. And I thought that's just like cells, coming together and dividing, that's what he's
Yes,
talking about.
yes, yes. Oh, the things they know. They don't have knowledge that is branched like ours. A concept in that being's intelligence links and unifies all the branches of human knowledge: history, music, math, biology, geology,
Right,
dance, like anything you can imagine. So I've never experienced thoughts of that nature, and it seems a great deprivation to not be able to. um,
right, right.
um, so I have so many questions, and I'm happy to respond if you have questions of me as well.
Okay.
One of the things I'm curious about is I've heard the story of you as the incredibly charming story of you as a little girl when the Ice Queen knocked on the door
Yeah.
and you invited her, you asked her mom and invited her in for tea. And I'm just curious if you can, by chance, recall, or if you care to share any of the question and any of the Q&A that took place.
Oh, well, that was so long ago. Let me see. All I can remember, of course, I asked. My mother wanted to know, who are you? And I told her that she said she was God's wife. Um, and she says, what does that mean? And she said, well, she's with God all the time. And, she takes care of business. She takes care of business, and my mother thought that was logical. Um, I'm trying to remember how that conversation went, really, because I mean, it's been, gosh, 65 years ago. It's a long time ago. Um, I just remember my mother asked me, "How did you know she was out there?" And I said, "I heard her calling in the eaves, you know, like when the wind was blowing, there was a storm outside, and I heard her calling in the eaves. Um, and it sounded like she was saying, wah, 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 like that. And I think that it was her name, Waset, so, but I didn't know. I thought it was God's wife. I guess I was impressed to say that that was what it meant. Um, uh, I know she liked Earl Grey with milk. She preferred that to the coffee that my mother was trying to give her. She told me that.
Ah.
Um, Gosh, I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know what else we talked about. She did talk about animals, and she wanted us to be very careful with the animals because they were, it was like they were carrying memories of who they used to be in ways that we can't articulate with them.
Mm.
But she says they remember and they find us, and we have to be careful with them and not treat them as if they're our, playthings or whatever, to really be cognizant of their intelligence. I think she told me that. Um, you know, and I think, and I think she told me that because um, I had a dog that my mother wouldn't let in the house, and it was cold outside. And so Isis was telling her, "You need to treat your dog better."
Mm.
And of course that made sense to me after I understood that her handmaiden found Anubis in the desert, and he was dying of thirst, and brought him to her, and she's the one who raised him. So it made sense to me when I was an older person reading that myth, going, "Oh, that's why she wanted to talk about the dogs."
Mm.
you know so
Yeah, in our common human experience, many moderns don't believe in angels, or they just think, well, they have thoughts, right?
mhm.
I understand why they do that. I have thoughts myself that are
Right.
kind of ridiculous and um, more the produce of my enculturation and enlanguaging than of love or participation with being. But the dogs are, I mean, if the dogs are pretty damn close to having an angel right there with you, right?
Yeah, they are.
It
They
seeks
are.
for you, it protects you, it senses what you can't, it communicates what it senses. And cats are profoundly similar in a very unique way, right?
Yes.
Dogs seem much more mundane generally, but each dog is unique. And cats seem very transcendentally sort of
Right.
almost like if the ether made an animal companion for the humans and then sent them, right? These are cats.
Right.
Do you have animals presently?
I do. When I was a young person, I had the dog. I
Uh-huh.
loved the dog. The dog was my best friend because when no one else would understand me, the dog understood me, you know. And I can remember sitting on the back steps talking to Sam. He was this wonderful little beagle dog, and he had the softest ears. And when I felt terribly misunderstood, he would turn to me and let me dry my tears on his ears. I mean, it was just so sweet. He was such a sweet dog. And then later, I had cats, and I had a very wonderful cat who passed recently. His name was Magic, and he really was. He was a protector. Um, he was a protector in a way that he took a psychic hit for me. I, there was an incident, and I was under psychic attack at that time. And I had two cats, and Buffy, the little yellow one, she's kind of like the fierce one. She chased this light. so I can only describe it as like a fireball that came out of the top floor of my house, went down the staircase, turned the corner, and flew over top of my bed where I was lying. Like it was going to get me. And Buffy was screaming, "No, no, no, no." I could hear her screaming. And at that point, Magic laid on top of my chest and he took the hit, and he passed soon after that. It was very sad, but I know he did that for me, you know. Um, and Buffy's still with me, and I have pictures of Magic on the phone, and when the phone is open, she'll go and lick the phone, lick his picture, and say hello to
Oh,
him.
really?
It's really sweet.
May I ask if that event took place in the house that you're in now, or is it in the house where there was a bad problem that I heard about?
Yes, it was in the house where there was a bad problem you heard about.
Okay, I understand. Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a long time ago, yes?
Um, it was about 6 years ago. It
Oh,
was
I
actually
see.
6 years ago.
Hmm.
There was another place where I had a bad problem in a house, and I had a dog at that time,
Mm.
and that dog was named Hobo. He was cool. I liked him, and gosh, he could see and sense the energy in that particular house. And I remember feeling pressed into my mattress where I couldn't move, like there was some physical energy right on top of me. And I opened my eyes and I could see the dog in the corner of the room looking on top of me and shivering like he could see it, you know. And it took everything that I had to just like throw that energy off.
Mm.
And yeah, I was young. I didn't know what to do when that happened. And so I thought, well, if you're going to act like that in my house, I'm going to leave. So I did. I left. Unfortunately, I did not know that I probably needed someone to come and clean that house.
Hmm.
And that energy, whatever it was left there. And the woman who moved in after me died there.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was not good. It was not good.
Did it occur, did it ever occur to you, and I don't mean to question what you may have ascertained about these matters, but I recall when I was listening to you telling the story of you becoming very angry. Um,
Yeah, that I drew
and
it in.
yes, but I
Yes.
wondered, a couple of things occurred to me when I was listening. Did it ever occur to you that the house may have had that energy prior to your anger or may have catalyzed that intensity of anger in you?
That house was very strange to begin with.
Mm.
And it was situated, I would say, almost like in the backyard of the governor's mansion in
Ah.
Kentucky.
Mhm.
And there was a concrete building right across from where I lived that housed several trustees who worked for the governor.
Mhm.
And I could feel their energy watching me. You know,
Mhm.
I had an event where it felt like someone tried to come into the house while I was sleeping.
Mhm.
And I called out, and I actually said the name of my boyfriend, and it stopped and they left.
Mm.
So you know, I think that there was something there. The people who lived, it was a quarter, you know, um, two up, two down. And the man who lived across from me, I'll just say it was a wife beater.
Mhm.
The man who lived under him with his wife and his kid, they, I called them Mr. Motorhead, Mr. and Ms. Motorhead, and Motorhead Jr. They, they would like go out in the back yard, take the engine of their car up and yank it up with a chain, spin it around, and then put it back in and put it together again, just for fun. I don't know. They
Hmm.
were nuts.
Hmm.
And then the person underneath me was a police officer who played 24/7 all year long Christmas carols. So it was a very strange place to live.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that probably, you know, I'll tell you what else I know about that place
Hmm.
is that that was the place where I was conceived because my parents had had that exact same apartment.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. And they moved out soon after that. So,
Wow.
so there was something I think that recognized me when I was there,
Hmm.
but I didn't know what to do with it. I was too young. I was
Hmm.
just starting my exploration into things like Dion Fortune and things like that. So I didn't know where the path was going to lead. So it just said, get out. My impulse was, get out of here. You need to get out of here. So I did.
Good. I mean, I'm glad that you did. But I just remember when I heard you telling the story, it seemed as if, sorry, there's some occasional traffic noise here. It seemed as if you felt that your anger had attracted or activated something. And it occurred to me when I was listening that the something may have been there, and possibly
Oh,
even like just the inversion of that was possible, right?
I think it
Um,
was already there.
mhm.
Yeah. And that, um, because we know that thoughts are things. And so my anger about something and just outrage grew into a consciousness of outrage. That whole apartment complex had the consciousness of outrage, in addition to the outrage of the people who were confined in the building across from me.
Mhm.
So it just was like this big vortex. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, a governor's mansion in Kentucky, one can only imagine the kinds of things that may have or were likely to have taken place there
Right,
historically and so
right,
forth. Yeah.
right.
Um, Let me see here. So I feel like a little kid at Christmas um, because I have so many questions. So I would love to hear anything you'd care to share about one of the experiences you had that shocked or surprised you the most, a non-ordinary experience.
Oh,
Are there ones that stand out? I know you must have had many. I mean, you were kind of a walking non-ordinary experience, but yeah.
yeah, I'm a walking non-ordinary experience. Um, I can tell you a lot of like really fun, interesting ones. Do you know about my Aunt Arzelia? Did I tell you about her? Have you heard about her?
Say again, please.
Arzelia. Her name is
No,
Arzelia.
no, no.
Okay. She was a medium. Um, the family has histories of mediums in the family. And she was my father's aunt. And she lived in Louisville. And she had a seance room up on her third floor of her house. And a bad relationship with her husband that she kept him in the basement. That's your house. This is my house. And my daughters live here with me.
Mm,
And I would hear all these stories about her, how people would come to spend the night with her. And when they got up in the morning, she would tell them, oh, your uncle so and so came to visit last night. And he said, you need to do this, blah, blah, blah. So she was really, you know, um, and given the fact of who I was and the things that I was seeing and doing as a child, my father would look at me and say, oh, you're just like her, you know. So, anyway, here's the story. My mother was pregnant with my brother. And about that time, this was like 2 years before I was born, her doctor was in Louisville, and so she stayed at Arzelia's house to go see her doctor. And Arzelia didn't tell her, but she put her up in the seance room because that was the extra room,
Mm.
that she had in the house. So mother's brushing her hair one night, and she looks in the mirror, and she sees a movement across it, and she sort of like tries to figure out what it is. And Arzelia goes, well, if you just sit still a minute, you'll see Billy. Billy was her sister's son who died of leukemia a couple of months before. You know, he was 7 years old. Um, and my mother didn't want to see Billy. So
Mm.
Arzelia went down to her room on the second floor. And during the night, mother saw standing at the edge of her bed Billy in his little cowboy pajamas that she had last seen him in. And like he really wanted to tell her something. And she had been wondering, she was a very religious woman, you can probably guess, because
Mm.
she was willing to talk to me about, God's wife. So she she wanted to know answers about how should I raise my children, what's on the other side, can Billy come back and help his family and so on. And but when he showed up, it frightened her. So she put the pillow over her face and said, go away. So when she comes down that morning, my Aunt Arzelia is in the kitchen and won't talk to her. Mom said, what did I do? And she said, well, you're just not very nice to my company. My mother goes, what do you mean? She said, well, after you told Billy to go away, he came to my room and told on you. So, and she had a long conversation with Billy, and my mother said, what did he say? And Arzelia goes, well, I'm just not going to tell you. So anyway, that was the story. The Now where that intersects with me is I heard all these stories about her. There was a daughter who had lived with her who had an abortion and died in that house. Um, so there was a lot of energy that was really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And other stories that we had heard. Um, so I drove up to Louisville with my mother and my brother. We were just tooling around the neighborhoods, and there was a for sale by owner sign in front of her house. My brother and I look at each other because we've heard these stories all our lives, right? And I was like, should we go in? You know? So we walk up there. Mom, you want to come in? No. She's sitting in the back seat of the car. She's not coming in. So my brother and I go walking up the steps. And about that time, this woman comes out. She meets us on the sidewalk. There's a little boy hanging on to her skirt, kind of peeping around at us. And she said, are you interested in the house? And we said, oh, well, yes, but maybe not the way you think we are. Um, we said, this house used to belong to our aunt. And she said, yes. Do you want me to tell me about her? My mother bought this house from your aunt. I lived here when I was a little girl. Do you want to come in? Oh, yes, we wanted to. So she told us all these stories about, now she was a very religious woman, but she had crosses everywhere because she was
Mm.
trying to keep, the bad energy out.
Mm.
And so she she said, when I got here, I was very surprised that they had used the front room as a bedroom. And we had never heard that was a bedroom.
Mm.
So it was like, well, what do you mean? She said, well, there's someone lying in a bed and there's all these people sitting around. They might be sick or something. And then the person just gets up and walks out. That was where they had the memorial service for the woman who died of the abortion.
Oh, wow.
And so she had seen her all her life, didn't know that story, but she would hear babies crying in her house. And one night, her sister, this was the scary part, her sister came with a brand new baby and her husband, and they were staying upstairs in one of the rooms on the second floor. And they woke up in the middle of the night and the baby was gone. They couldn't figure out where the baby was. It was only like a couple of months old. It couldn't have crawled away, and it was in between them,
Mm.
So they get up, and all of a sudden they look under the bed, and the baby is swaddled, all wrapped up and tucked under the bed. And, when I said something about it to my father, he said, yes, that's what they did with the children that they didn't keep. He just put it that way. I was like, oh. I was like, okay. So
You know,
it was a very strong, potent house, and I heard so many stories about it. I wanted to find out about Chesterfield, which is where my aunt had studied
mm,
to become a medium.
mm,
I said, I'm going to go up there and find out what they do. And so I started taking classes. I was there for 10 years. I bought a house, became a medium. Yeah, but that's another story. But anyway, that's how I got there because I was going to write a novel about her.
mm. Did you ever begin?
Oh, yeah, I've started it. I haven't finished it.
Mm.
But hang on just a second. I'm
Sure.
noticing that the
Take your
battery is running low. I'm just going to plug it in real fast.
take your time.
There we go. That should be better. Let me see. I didn't want it to run out. Oh, yeah, it looks like it's charging now. Yeah, okay. Uh, I don't know. That was a long story.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful to hear the story. I'm grateful for all of your stories. I've spent the past few weeks. How did I discover you? Trying to remember now. I've spent the past few weeks listening to many interviews with you, and they're all wonderful. You have the music of your voice is very rich and vital and alive, and I just love to hear. I'm very sensitive to human voices, right? It's one of the ways that we magically shape the world, even though we sort of take it for granted because we speak all the time. And as I've gotten older, I've come to be very suspicious of speaking in various ways,
Hmm.
also of
Hmm.
writing. I'm a writer as well. Um,
Right. I know you are. I looked you up too.
mm, yeah. So I've become much more suspicious of what we most commonly do with these incredible abilities. And I felt I really kind of took a pause this morning to consider how we might explore together today. Why? Okay, so why do you suppose the humans are different from the animals, and how are they the same?
Hmm. Um, for me at this point, it's probably easier for me to say how they're the same because it doesn't matter what our species is, we're mostly water. No, walking
Yeah.
around inside a bag, and we're mostly water. And so it makes sense to me that these, etheric vibrations, we know that sound travels through water, that our thoughts affect the shape of the water, our voices. I love looking at those images of the cymatics inside the Great Pyramid. I
Oh,
love that. I love that. And
wait,
so
wait. Say something about the cymatics inside the Great Pyramid. I was not aware of this yet.
Oh, you weren't?
No.
Oh, well, Stephen Halloran, is that his name? Stephen Halloran? Uh, put this big rubber mat somehow over top of the Great Pyramid and a disc that had sand in it. And so he started to chant and tone over top of it. Um,
Oh, yes,
oh,
yes.
yeah. And it would make the shapes of, various geometric shapes over top
Hmm.
of it. Um, and I know that when I was with Gene Houston, that's the first time I ever experienced it. You know how Gene has that huge, booming, resonant voice. And she was toning with all these other people inside this room. I think there must have been 70 of us. And I'm lying inside this sarcophagus, and it felt like the water. I could feel water just sloshing over me, waves of energy. And it was like lifting me up, and I just kind of, I wouldn't say passed out, but released into it and felt myself, elevated and then come back down slowly after the tones died away. But it was quite amazing. And I thought, I could have left my body. Well, happily left it there. Yeah. So the video of Steve Halpern, I always show a bunch of these videos to my students because I think I know when we go in there and tone and we hit E and we hold it for a long time, you can hear that sound out on the plateau. You
Mm.
know, it's quite amazing. That's the only sound. It's E. It responds to E. So
Really?
yeah,
It's so
I don't know
funny.
why that is, but
As
yeah,
a guitar player, right? E is the top and bottom string of the standard tuning. And I've always had a weird fascination with that tone. Um, hmm.
yeah,
I mean, music is so it's both mundane, but it can't be stuck there. It's one of the few human behaviors that is almost impossible to trap it. Of course, the humans find ways, right,
right,
to make the transcendental completely mundane.
right,
Um, us moderns, we tend to we are trained to think. One of the things my experience, it obliterated everything I'd ever thought, the ways that I thought about Earth and nature and the sky and all these things. It completely reforged them. But the humans think that the animals and the plants and the insects and the water creatures and all these things, they think they're separate things.
yeah,
And they don't realize something that should be relatively obvious, which is that we wouldn't exist if they weren't there. Right?
yeah,
It's almost like the earth is a little droplet of not regular water, but like kind of a magic water. And all of the forms that she emits and produces and sustains are actually one form
hmm,
with many organs. This is one way of imagining it anyway.
right, right,
And I find the hubris of the common humans, like the groups of them, terrifying. I remember when I was little, the adults thought insects were just sort of pests. You just destroy those things. They're just bad.
right.
And they were my friends. I adored them. They were obviously sophisticated beings, right? And not like whatever the adults were thinking. I suspect the Egyptians were deeply aware of matters such as these, right? That we are here together.
Yeah, it's a guarded world. I mean, that's the way I think of it. Everything is a part of everything else. The divine body of an ant and the divine body of Normandy and the divine body of Buffy, my cat, that we're all, parts of this huge consciousness that can communicate and send messages across space and time. I think, somebody would ask me, what is God? And I would say, it's consciousness. It's all the facets, all like a crystal with all the different faces that all hold a reflection. And consciousness is that, you know. Um, so that is why people like us, and I'm just going to include you in it,
Thank you.
are working very hard to try to use our consciousness as we sit in meditation to communicate and make changes to the world. But we have to be careful how we do it, because we don't presume to know exactly why things are going on and happening the way they do. And so I have always been taught by my teacher, who said, when you do that kind of meditation, you always think this or something better. Like, you got a better idea, God, then I'm for it. you know,
Yes. Leave an open space for that which is beyond what we can immediately conceive of or concern ourselves with.
right, right. So when we want to manifest something, we always have to leave that opening, this or something better. And I have been doing experiments with 369 numerology. Do you know about 369 numerology? Yeah, you do. Yeah. Well, I can't hear you though. Something happened to your voice. It didn't want you to say that.
I guess. Can you hear me
Oh, there
now?
you go. Okay, now you're back.
Okay, great. Wow.
Yeah.
But
So,
yes, please 369. Yeah.
yeah. And so I've been doing that every morning, every afternoon, and the evening, and working on, thinking to myself, how does this work? And so I would try to manifest something, you know, that I needed. Like, right now, I'm trying to manifest a roofer.
A roofer?
A roofer, right?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think I wanted to manifest a trip to Egypt for December next year. It's already full. I needed a sum of money, and it came exactly the amount I wanted. I needed to sell my condo because I'm not living in that place anymore. And within a month, it sold for even more than I asked. I
Mm.
mean, so, if it's in alignment with the divine plan, it will happen, you know.
Mm.
And the thing is not to worry about it, not to think, oh, I have to go and do this meditation because if I don't, I won't get it. No, that's worry's a prayer for something you don't want. So,
That sounds like Southern wisdom.
right. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. It's just like, what was her name? Uh, Mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter.
Yeah, that sounds like got a similar tang to it.
Yeah.
Normandy, tell me something about how you were born and how you got your name.
Oh, I think both of my parents claim to have been the source of my name, but my mother can't explain it exactly. My father says I was named after a cartoon character that was drawn by Milt Caniff, called Terry and the Pirates. That was the comic strip before Dick Tracy.
Hmm.
Um, and there was this, it was during the war, and there was this character who was like a hero. She was sort of like a Xena warrior princess type person.
Hmm.
Okay. And so I said, well, Daddy, what happened to her? You named me after her. He said, yes, she was going to be tall and beautiful, and a warrior princess. And I said, so what happened to her? He was like, well, she got shot off the back of a tank. Okay, we're going to pass on that. But that was really I believed that because my father, he had some dyslexia. He was a very smart man, very artistic, well spoken, um, loved people, believed totally in education, but he taught himself to read when he was a child. He was dyslexic and he couldn't read. So not his mother, but his babysitter, I guess, they would paper the kitchen walls with comic strips. And he would put the comic strips, help her paper them, and they would read them together. And that's how he
Mm,
learned how to read.
that's beautiful.
So, yeah, a very Southern story.
Who were some of the most profound influences on your mind when you were little, when you were young, teens, and so forth?
Um, gosh,
And
there was,
and if they aren't human, that's fine too. But
well, family wise, I didn't know Arzelia well, but the family members who spoke about her were very influential. And I believe that they made me a storyteller because I was the youngest, one of the youngest of all these children in our family. And around the family table, I would sit underneath the dining room table, kind of hiding under the lace tablecloth and listening to the grown-ups talk about, well, so and so did da, 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 da. And oh no, that's not how that happened. It happened like this. So I grew up inheriting all these stories, tons and tons of stories.
there's something quite profound about that because you're still doing something similar with the netters. It's like you're sitting under the tablecloth of the sky and you're listening to the conversations.
Yeah. And who made the tablecloth? It's the goddess Neith, the weaver.
Mm,
She's the great grandmother of all of them. And this was my
mm.
grandmother's tablecloth I was telling you about. So, yeah, you're right. I never made that connection, but I like it.
So profound.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
were there
Mo, my grandmother's dog, Mo, was very important. He was a St. Bernard, and just put your arms around him and lay your head in his fur, and you could feel him just, his heart was so big. He loved everybody. Oh, he was so good.
it just strikes me that without the animals, we wouldn't even know what we are, and we might be really confused about what our hearts are too.
I
Because
think
the
so.
animals are just so profound. I mean, particularly the cats and the dogs, right? The 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 fervor with which they adore us is I mean, I'm
Yes.
speechless, right? I can't even
Yes.
it's pure.
It is pure.
It's almost like the spirit of virtue comes into material reality and finds a dog or a cat or and then just embodies this way. It's so
Yeah.
difficult for us humans to be, what does how can a tree transgress?
Right. Well, I know. I know.
It's confusing for us. We're so um we have all these different facets interiorly. We become confused in time and in meaning and identity, in purpose, right? And what do you use? What is your compass?
What is my compass? Gosh. I um well, I'm going to go back and say it's the stars because that's all the stories in the sky that are transmitted down to us through astrology. And today I was writing about Zoser, the pharaoh of the third dynasty. He's got this serdab that his statue is seated in. I think they plucked his eyes out or something, but he's still in there, leaning back, looking straight up into the Great Bear constellation, Draco and all of that. And that's his northern star, and that's his destiny. That's what they saw as, draconian astrology is about the North Node and how it teaches us what our past was, uh, ancestral past, and where we're going now, what we need to work on in this lifetime. And then I said that, and I could feel this is kind of interesting. I'm sitting here talking to you, and I feel this serpent underneath my foot, like my foot starts vibrating, like it's crawling under my foot. There's no snake in here. So, but it's
No,
kind of
see,
interesting.
this is the problem with the humans, right? They feel, they know, then they look and they refute.
Mhm.
There's no snake.
Right, but it was
Really?
definitely in here.
Right, right. This is the problem, right? We
Right.
confuse like we have senses that I think are naturally outside of time and identity, but we're so used to collapsing those senses into deliverables, right? Is
Yeah.
there an actual snake there? No. Okay, let's go on. So
Right.
this leads us to ignore so many of the faculties that aren't merely associated with the physical, not that these aren't important, but
Right.
these can become deceptive if we dismiss uh, that which would wisely and beautifully guide them, you know?
Yes. I mean, there are physical senses, and the body is a temple. So it's intended for us to feel and see and smell and taste and touch. But the clairs are, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairgustience, claircognizance, clairsentience,
Yes.
all of those clairs are how we actually know things.
Yes.
And to become accustomed to those and to use those is important. I often see spirit moving in front of me somewhere, like that picture. I will
Mhm.
often see it, out of the corner of my eye. And it doesn't frighten me. It, in fact, comforts me because
Yes.
it's like I'm not alone in this whole uh, theater of existence. You know, I have company. You know, uh, it's good. It's good.
I think the thing that is frightening is that there's an aspect of our mind that is very comfortable with the predictable continuity of the physical and the similar predictable continuity of common human thought, world picture, sky picture, so forth. And that thing that is comfortable with those features of our experience is threatened if something non-ordinary is introduced because it draws its ontology, if you will, its world picture. It draws that
Mhm.
into question. And I don't know, there's this strange conflict between our interior being, our spirit, our origin, our true intelligence, our creativity, and so forth, and the very domineering layers of human representational culture that really just want to bury that stuff, right?
Right. Right.
I'm curious if there are particular scholars that you found enlightening, specifically
Mm.
about Egypt or, spiritual issues in general.
Many, many. Um, I love Dion Fortune. She's one of my favorites. Um,
You encountered her quite young, yeah?
I did. I did. Um,
In a
uh,
way, she gave you permission to become who you
who I
are.
am. She did give
Yeah,
me permission to become who I am.
beautiful. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't ignore it after I saw, well, that happened to her. That's what's going on. I
Hmm.
had a friend who generously loaned me my first book of Dion Fortune and said, I really want to keep this book. So, give it back to me when you're done. I gave it back to him 18 years later. It's like, sorry. But it was one of those funny things. Yeah, Dion Fortune was one of them. I would say The Time Falling Bodies Take to Light. Do you know that book?
What an incredible title. I've seen
William
the book.
Irwin Thompson.
Oh, I love him. I have a couple of his books. He's amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He's really good. I
He's a
love him.
prodigy of his skills with language are outstandingly beautiful.
Yes. I just love that title. And that's, you know, uh, of course, Manly P. Hall would be one
Hmm.
of those of my favorites. And though I never met him, he shows up in my dreams a lot.
Mm.
He, this very tall man who has a shock white hair, you know. Sorry, a car just dropped out. Oh, Otten, the sun god. Um, yeah, the light. Oh, the light, the light. Manly P. Hall will like stand in this darkened hallway and point to a room and says, "This is where your class is." And I will go in there. And there's a coffin with one of my friends who had died. And one of his students who was in the coffin with him. And he'll look up and go, "Oh, there you are." So, things like that. It's like, "Oh, you're being very Osirian for me." Okay. But Manly's conducting the class. He's saying, you're going to go and teach this class. And so I do. He shows up. Um, Gosh, I'm trying to think. I love Jeremy Taylor was my first dream teacher. And then after that, I follow Robert Moss. I think he's an important. Jean Houston's just, she lives inside my head. Yeah. And sometimes it's really funny when I'm teaching, people will tell me, "You said that just like Jean says it." I was like, "Oh, well, I must have been channeling her." So yeah, I love Jean Houston. Um, Gosh, there's so many. I could just turn around and look at some of these books and, you know, oh, what is that guy's name? Wait a minute. See if I can find it on the shelf. It's about the Kabbalah and Buddhism.
Mm.
And I can't remember. It'll come to me in a minute.
Mm.
I'll shout it out when I remember it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, but I like mixes of information that come this and that joined together.
Yeah, you're a brilliant synthesist. You synthesize naturally from different traditions, though you're well known for your work with ancient Egypt, particularly in hieroglyphs, which are probably the most fascinating form of language that we have around here.
Yeah.
I've started to study them, um, and learn to draw a few, and I'm just beginning to pay close attention to them again, primarily after being introduced to you. Um, are have you do you have any familiarity with this guy, Rene Schwaller de
De
Lubitz?
Lubix? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love his work. I was introduced to him through John Anthony West.
Yes.
And then, so West sort of explained what Schwaller de Lubix was doing in West's kind of, side of the mouth, flicking his cigarette way. Um, and then there are other people like Lucy Lamy
Hmm.
that kind of expounded on that. And then uh, Geraldine Pinch is one of those. Rosemary Clark, is that her name? There are a ton of those. There's a new guy named NEXT. Do you know him?
No.
Okay, that's really his name. NEXT is his last name, and his first name is ANYEXTEE. and
Wow.
he's taken on the symbolist cloak that Schwaller de Lubix has, that John Anthony West gave him. He studied with West for a really long time, and now he's taken it to all the other temples, not just the Temple of Man, but all the other temples in Egypt. And now he's extending it to Gobekli Tepe.
Mm.
It's amazing. I highly recommend his work.
I was put on to Mr. West by Chance Gardner.
I don't know
Do you
him.
know him?
Mm-mm.
So, another brilliant woman who I had the privilege of having some time with, Dr. Joanna Kuyawa, she interviewed Chance Gardner, and he made this series that I think is probably one of the best condensations of features of de Lubis's work. I think it's called Magical Egypt. It's very difficult to get a hold
That
of.
sounds familiar, though. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, that's not surprising given who you are. Like Magical Egypt is, you know,
Yeah, I think I've seen that book. I might have seen it in a bookstore on Magical Egypt that was in Luxor.
well, Chance Gardner, what he did was, so one of his propositions, if you'll call it this, which I think he draws from similar kinds of analysis to that de Lubis did, is that many of the Egyptian temples and some of their art has to do with the structure of the human brain.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what Gardner did is they made, I think, many episode series, and you can see little excerpts from it in his interview with Dr. Kuyawa, and it's astonishing. It's like one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It's cinematically beautiful. It's intellectually profound. The way that they use visualization to show the relationships between um, features of the brainstem and the hippocampus and the pineal gland and certain features of Egyptian architecture and so forth is astonishing. It was
Yeah.
really beautiful, but I can't find the series anywhere. I'm hoping to have a chance to talk with Mr. Gardner at some point. I have to find a
Oh,
way to.
that would be great.
He's hard
Yeah.
to get. He's a little hard to get a hold of. Um, I'm curious if are there one or two experiences, or does anything come to mind where something happened in your awareness or your consciousness, and still to this day you wonder what was going on there? What was that? I'm asking about things that deeply puzzled you, if anything comes to mind.
I keep lately I'm more and more fascinated with alien theories because I don't know anything about it. I'm always getting people asking me, "Did the aliens build the pyramids?" And I just want to say to people, it's a mystery how they were built. That's why they call it a mystery.
Well, I mean,
but
there's all.
but what I was going to say is that, and we're going back to another story from my childhood. Okay,
Mm,
my father, I told you he was dyslexic, but he was also during the war. He took radio transmissions and tried to translate them. I mean, so of course they gave him that kind of job, right?
hmm
Yeah. So, and then after that, he worked for the Atomic Energy Commission in Ohio with his uncle, who was part of the FBI. So they were doing that. And here's the story. One Once after I was born, I was a couple months old. Can't remember exactly this whole thing, so I only know how it was told to me. My family was driving back from Easter in Kentucky to Ohio, and they crossed the river and are heading into Portsmouth, which was where all that atomic energy stuff was going on.
Mm.
Um, and Dad sees a light up ahead of him, and it comes down, and this light bangs on the roof of the car, and it stops. The car stops. My mother's holding me. My brother's asleep in the back seat. He's maybe 2.5 years older than me. And my dad gets out, and there's the light over behind the hill. And so he walks up toward the hill to see what that light was, right? So I don't know what he said it was. He came back, he got in the car, he started the car up, and they're driving back to Portsmouth. And then all of a sudden, my mother screams because she suddenly realizes she's not holding me anymore. I'm lying on the back seat with my brother. And she doesn't remember how that happened,
Mm.
right? So, so there's part of me that thinks something was testing me, exploring ways to communicate with me. And I have had experiences where, like one of them, I remember, no, this must have been maybe 10 years ago. Um, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I just suddenly got very tired. And so I thought, well, I'll just meditate, right? So I'm sitting up on the edge of the bed with my eyes closed, right? And I'm just feeling this energy. And all of a sudden, I look up, and there is a being in front of me, kind of bluish, a little bit white, large eyes, looks right at me and says, doesn't say, but thinks, oh, we thought you were asleep. And then he goes, boop, it hits me on the forehead, and I fall over. When I wake up in the morning, I'm lying on my bed sideways. That's how I fell asleep. And I thought, was that real? Was it a dream? Did that actually happen? Another time in that same room, um, they came, and I saw them earlier in the evening looking, peering through the curtains in the room. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to not pay attention to that. I'm just going to go to sleep, whatever. I'm not going outside in the dark to look. So I look up, as I'm falling asleep, I look up in the ceiling, and it is as if the ceiling opens up a crack, and I can see their little heads looking down at me, checking to see if I'm asleep. So several times in this same house, I had visits from beings, consciousness from another place and time. I don't think they meant any harm to me. I wasn't afraid of them,
Hmm.
but I found it interesting. Now, how do you explain that? I mean, I don't know.
I think you did a I think you did very well. You explained it by describing your experience of it. Does it have to it doesn't have to fit into the human category. Uh, you know, the little catalog of human categories like thing, animal, being, plant, object,
Right,
that's useful in a very narrow slice of existence.
right.
Outside of that narrow slice, that stuff's mostly useless and doesn't work. So we, we're really it's unfortunate that we're so stuck.
Yeah,
Um, have you yourself ever seen something in the sky that you didn't know what it was?
yes,
Mhm.
yes. Um, uh, I was teaching a class in Colorado, um, at South Park. So I didn't know South Park was like headquarters for alien activity. But
Mm.
I'm like standing on this porch and watching these lights come up, and they sort of like moving, sideways, and then they come forward, and then they go back, and then they do this little spiral thing with each other. Then they come together and they get bigger, and it's like I'm just watching this going with my friend Karen, who's teaching with me. Do you see that? Yeah, she sees that. The people we're staying with go, we see that all the time. you know. So I was like, okay, you know. not to be frightened.
It's funny. There's a complex relationship that I think is easily overlooked in how we approach experience, where, in a way, once we determine what something is, this
Yeah,
aspect of thought that's very concerned with grasping can dismiss it.
yeah,
So it's like once we determine what it is, that often ends our chance to participate with it.
right.
And I once wrote this piece where I talked about I asked a similar question, has anything ever happened to you that you don't know what it was? And I encouraged the readers to embrace that mystery,
Yeah,
right? Because with every person we love, with the animals we love, with the sky, with Egypt, with all of the features of our experience, the vastest portion of it doesn't fit in the explanation. It's in the
right.
relationship, right?
That's
And
right.
and that's where the beauty and the grace and the transcendental aspect naturally dwells and resonates, and then we can harmonize with it.
Right.
The humans are worried about aliens, and it's kind of funny because if you think carefully about our situation on Earth, we live on a planet chock full of space life, right? Octopuses and praying mantises, bears, whales, giraffes, hawks. All these beings, they are creatures from outer space because that's the only place creatures come from.
Right.
Isn't it?
Right.
It's not like they came from the Earth separated from outer space. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yet this is how we're trained to think about it. We think humans are on the top of the ladder. The other animals are, well, that's, they're just sort of dumb things, right? And then maybe there are sky beings, but then if we think there are sky beings, the moderns anyway, they think of them as people in spaceships. It's very
Right.
unlikely. It's not impossible that people in spaceships have come to Earth, but it seems wildly unlikely that the majority of the phenomena are that. Like
Right. Well,
one of the
that
things,
that movie, like My Octopus Teacher, was
right?
making me think of that. You
Hmm.
know, yeah, because that's a being from some other kind of consciousness
Yes,
that's communicating with us.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you wanted to meet aliens, you can just go to any place where there's organisms and you're set up, right? You don't
Right.
have to wait for spaceships. I mean, just contact the mind of a raccoon for a minute and you'll get everything you were hoping for and a
Oh
lot
God.
more, right?
God, yeah. Oh,
Um, After my own experience and in the aftermath of that experience, particularly more or less recently, one of the things that I'm very curious about and that I've studied for many years is the topic of the development of human consciousness over time, right?
yes.
So, like, I have a lot of questions that I'm in love with, and I'm not seeking their answer because that's kind of like a divorce. But I'd like for the question to expand, right? Yeah, yeah,
Right.
I love. um, and okay, where am I going here? Did I lose my train of thought? Oh, yes. So, when that being was with my mind, it was like for the first time, I knew what I was for,
Wow.
what I was made for. In the same way that if you could imagine a fish which has somehow been kept alive outside of water its entire life and then is suddenly placed in water, this is how I felt.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think our people are sort of like flowers on a world with no bees. Like we were made for um, relation with a layer of existence that we have stories about that are very confusing, but we don't have much experience. Of course, you have experience, and I have experience. And in fact, I think all of us probably had experience when we were very small. But what occurred to me somewhat recently is that our we were made for relation with non-human intelligences. And something happened. Probably a series of things happened over time. In fact, this is what I was shown, where the organ of relation that linked us, it broke down.
Yeah.
Right? It was damaged over time. And then humans forgot what we are and what we're for. And this is just I'm presenting this as a toy, not as here's what I think is going on, just as a perspective. So I know for a fact that when the gods, quote unquote, or the angels disappeared, the humans went insane. Right? They just started doing crazy, insane stuff, which they're continuing to do very effectively today. Um, but until very recently, it never occurred to me that something similar might have happened on the other side. That being deprived of their human appendages, maybe the divine beings also had a struggle, right? And it could be that some portion of the things that we're calling UFOs, in the same way we built artificial intelligence to represent them, they built these transcendental object beings as a way to recover their loss of us.
Mm.
It's just a toy, but it's a very compelling toy for me. I've been very curious about the UFO thing since I was a little kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
and have followed it very closely. And the recent developments are certainly astonishing. And in fact, when I was talking with Dr. Kuyawa, this is what she was very focused on. And a number of the of other wise women who I'm graced with relationships with, you know, have suddenly been thrust into this
Right.
particular venue.
Right. There's a whole council up there.
Yes, this is what was clear to me too. There are things that are they're not the same as human nations, but there are features that resemble that human nations are sort of an abstraction of, right?
Mhm.
Um, huh. I just don't want to get too lost. I am curious, what are the stones in your rings?
Oh, they're Bedouin. I got them at a Bedouin shop in Egypt.
Uh-huh.
So there's a carnelian right there.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
They're pretty.
Beautiful.
I love it. Let's see if I can get you the side of that. Isn't that
Oh,
pretty?
yeah, yeah, that's gorgeous.
Yeah, it was some family jewel that they were poor enough they wanted to sell it at the market, and so I bought it from that dealer. Now this
Wow.
one is an amber.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and it just has I don't know if you can see it in there. It has like a pyramid inside it.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of hard to
Wow.
see, but anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's what they are.
I think it was you that was telling the story of the man that sells potions who you go to. Or
Oh, Gamal.
Gamal, yeah, yeah. I'm
Oh,
so
he's lovely.
jealous.
He's
How
lovely. You'll have to come with me. I
oh,
have boxes and boxes of oils. I bring people to him and they buy like tons and tons of oils because they're all like Reiki crazy and body chemistry and he'll go, so
right.
what do you want, Normandy? And I have all these oils and I'm not really an oil person. I just like to smell them.
Uh-huh. Well, you could send some of them to me.
All
I'll
right, I think I
happily
will.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll happily take them off your
Um,
hands if you wish.
yeah, but there's some amazing stuff, some amazing oils. And he gave me this whole download of use this oil for this and use it for this. And, one of the things I love that he told me is that he washes his clothes with drops of frankincense in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just got a little bit of that for the first time.
Yeah.
That
Love
stuff
it.
is pure magic.
It is.
It transforms awareness instantaneously on contact with my sinuses, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And
You
when he
know,
takes a shower, he puts it on his shoulders
oh,
and then
wow.
just lets the water, that stuff is magic. I love it.
What do you make of the modern fascination with psychedelic drugs?
I was just thinking about John Lilly,
I
actually.
love him. I mean,
Yeah, he's,
he became a little bit crazy. I think some people have been destroyed by ketamine, but
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
loved him. I have some of his books.
yeah. He's an interesting guy. I had some of his books too. And when I was researching angels, I was in consciousness, that my belief is that angels are consciousness. It's
Hmm.
just, uh, yeah. So anyway, that's my ancient tradition of angels book. It's about that. And I did a lot of research with him. I uh, experimented a lot with various types of hallucinogens when I was younger.
Hmm.
And I felt like once you don't have to keep doing it.
Hmm.
You know, it's much better and much clearer to me to put myself in the space where I need to be to find it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I don't do any of that anymore.
I remember the first time I tried LSD, I was probably 13. And it was a
Mm,
very profound and mind-blowing experience. But I also had this feeling that there was something, that it was like the promise of something that was not being fully delivered,
mhm.
right? And it wasn't because the dose was low or something like that.
Right, right.
Um, and then I remember, so I have a pet name for the intelligence that I had the experience with. I call him Toy Maker. Complex long story. He gives me toys of insight, right? Is the simple explanation of that. And any moment with his mind was beyond anything psychedelics could possibly deliver. It
Right.
was really like delivering on the promise that was never really fulfilled. And I mean, psychedelic drugs, it's a very complex topic, but I think you said something that's become very important to me, which is that I would like human beings to have endogenous, like non-ordinary experiences without the drug first, because then at least they will know that our bodies and our souls and our minds are capable of astonishing things that we would never expect. Whereas if they have the drug first, it's sort of like giving the child the video game before you give them a living adventure.
Right. I agree with you. I don't think that people can get to that awareness. I mean, this is just my opinion, without at least having one experience of it, at least one. But I do not recommend multiple experiences where you get confused about what was that experience.
Oh,
Anyway,
oh, I see. So that's really interesting. That's a perspective I've never entertained before. I just want to say that back to you to ensure that I took your
okay.
meaning. So you're saying something like one or maybe two experiences can open something within you so that you have an idea of the direction to go in,
Yeah,
right?
I
Something
think
like this.
so.
Mm.
It's like having been born inside a house and never opened a window. So you open the window, it's like, oh, there's air out there. I get it. Okay, good. But you don't have to do that every single time and jump out the window and try to fly. No.
Right, right.
I will say, I'll tell you my favorite LSD experience. This was beyond, beyond. It was the best thing
Mhm.
that I was in a state where I understood the secret to the universe. It was like it just got downloaded to me. And I was nonverbal by that point. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't be around people. So I went into my room and I sat, and there was my typewriter, and I wanted to download this information. It was like the secret of the universe. And I couldn't figure out how to work the typewriter. So so I got a piece of paper and a crayon, back to basics. And I wrote something down and I folded it up and I put it on top of the computer. And I thought, when on the typewriter, when I wake up in the morning, I'll have it. I'll have the secret to the universe. So anyway, finally, I went to sleep, slept a very long time, woke up the next day. The first thing I do is open my eye and I see that piece of paper on top of the typewriter. And I kind of crawl over to it and open it up and I read it with great joy. And it says, "You ready for the secret to the universe? Everything is okay." It's like, of course. Yeah.
You know, part of why it's okay is because we are released from the prison of knowing what stuff is,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so just like children, right, where it's your knowledge is not what's leading your consciousness at all. Your enthusiasm, your ecstasy, your curiosity, your wonder, your awe, your physical exuberance, these are leading your awareness, and that's a completely different kind of thing. I too have made the mistake of writing secrets down while under the influence of like psychedelic drugs, that I made a far worse mistake, which was spending most of the time when the being was with me writing. I was like, I've
Uh-huh.
got to preserve these things. Yeah.
Right.
And it's not that it's terrible. That's not it's not only bad that I did that. But if I had, if I had a do-over, I think I wouldn't be able to. It's too compelling. The
Right.
experience is so compelling. But what I would like to have been able to do is to just sort of stay pregnant and silent,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Have you seen a miracle? I mean, I think you are a miracle, just to be clear about that. But have you seen one?
I think I have. Yes. I think I've seen a miracle. Um, I talk a lot to people about how our consciousness can impregnate inanimate objects. Okay. And there's this statue of the goddess Sekhmet in Egypt. And she's very alive. She's alive because so many pilgrims have come and stood before her and talked to her and adored her and felt a resonance with her. You know, um, I have felt that resonance with her. But the miracle was that I had a woman who was on her journey to become, you know, a priestess of the mysteries. She went in to see Sekhmet, and I was standing outside the door. And of course, there's no wind or anything because you go like this, there's the door, there's Sekhmet inside there, and the gate just swings shut and it locked her in there. She came back and she couldn't get out. Her eyes were like huge saucers, and she was crying. And I said, just go talk to her, And so she stood there, got down on her knees, you know. It was amazing. I thought to myself, no, we're not going to let her out or go get the guy with the key because when Sekhmet's done with her, she's going to let her go.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what happened. The gate opened up and she walked out, and you could just see her face. She had seen the magic of that goddess in action. And I witnessed the miracle of her being enclosed inside that room and then released. And I will say that was a miracle. She now leads trips to Egypt. Yeah.
You know, it's profound, the role of witness,
Yes.
right? We may overlook this in our evaluations of circumstances, and we think, oh, it's the one to whom it happened, right? Which is, of course, also true, but the role of witness is a very profound role, to be the one who is there present with the transformation and
Right.
can corroborate.
I think it is important
Mm.
because when something like that happens to you, there's a part of you that says, did I just make that up? But I didn't have to ask that. It didn't happen to me. It happened to her. And
Hmm.
I saw it,
Hmm.
and I saw what that change did in her life. I mean, everything shifted in her life, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Sekhmet brought her to who she is right now.
You know, as moderns, it's probably hard to understand, but I think it's my perspective anyway. And my perspectives change over time. I like to learn rather than to just forge
Yeah,
biases, right? Because
yes.
I can forge biases just like anyone else. Um, but it's my perspective that as the relationship between our ancestors and the gods broke down, the humans had to work in various ways to reestablish that connection.
Hmm.
And it would never occur to moderns that statues could actually be gods, but
Hmm.
they can,
Hmm.
right? We're just missing the experiences that would allow us to understand this. When I was much younger, I remember first encountering one of the strangest and most wonderful books that I love. Are you familiar at all with Julian Jaynes?
Yes, yes. Breakdown of the bicameral mind. Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes. So there's some fascinating speculations in there, and he's an amazing mind. He gets some things obviously wrong, but let's be clear about something. When you go to the restaurant, you don't order everything on the menu, right? You order certain things, and it's the same thing with brilliant people. Brilliant people also have, um, what would you call it? Like parts of them that don't see, blind spots and so forth, right? Even we all do. It's natural to us. One of the things that's amazing is when two people come together, even as we are today, right? And they exchange their seeing and their hearts and their experience. Um, the blind spot of your companion can become a way of seeing for you and vice versa, right? So
right.
it's not they're really only a problem when we're sort of isolated. But yeah, I think that the Egyptians were aware of how to embody celestial, like non-human intelligences, divine beings. And
Right.
they had a technology, not a technology the way we think about it, a relational technology to invest material objects such that not, I mean, perhaps in some cases a being was trapped in there, but more that it was a doorway for that being to interact with humans through
Yeah, I think
not.
it's like a doorway. Do
Mhm.
you know a book by Lyle Watson called The Secret Life of Inanimate Objects?
No, but I've got one of his books, Life Tide, on my shelf right
Yeah,
here.
he's cool. Secret
Yeah.
Life of Inanimate Objects. And that's what the ancient Egyptians believed, that with all those prayers and everything, they animated the divine statues. If that statue broke, you know, and lost its magic, they had to bury it with ceremony and everything. And there was a grave for the divine beings. But Lyle Watson talks about how these statues of the Virgin Mary would start weeping tears, and that they would move around the chapels and the
Mhm.
churches where they were kept. Even when they chained them to the floor, they would
Yeah, they
break the
find the
chains and they
chains
would still
broken.
move.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
right.
And I think that that is a really great example of how we imbue um, our love and our consciousness into an object. That's why a medium can pick up your grandfather's watch and say, this is what he was thinking,
Hmm.
because it contains his living consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they were like, I mean, it's really funny. These things,
Uh-huh.
this is the closest representation to what the angel does, right? It connects you to the non-material intelligence place,
Yeah.
right? And so instead of this, they had statues.
Right.
And compared to their statues, you would never touch this. If you could be with one of the statues as you were in that photograph, you'd be like, yeah, this stuff, just stay away from it. I mean,
Yeah. Right. Right.
is it your experience that electronic devices interfere with spiritual senses and abilities?
Yes and no. I have had spirit. Um, I have had spirit talk to me on my phone.
Oh.
Um, I was driving with a friend up in Michigan. We were going to see John Bunker, who was a medium. He's a medium that I worked with. I developed a relationship with him when he was already in spirit. And John Bunker was buried up in Michigan, but he would come into my meditation room and we would sit and write together every morning at 8 o'clock. He would come and we would write, and then we would write for half an hour, and then it was done. Okay, so I started getting lazy and didn't show up at 8 o'clock. I'd be there at 8:15. Well, he left at 8:30. He always left at 8:30. At 8:20, he started slapping me on the face, like, wake up, you know. So I asked him, "It's like, what'd you do that for?" And he said, I got places to be, You're not the only person I'm working with. I was like, oh, okay, I get it you know. But when he first showed up at my house, I was on this trip to go to see where he was buried. And I did that and I talked to him and, hello, John Bunker. I just want you to know I live in Chesterfield. I'm a friend of Mabel Riffles. I own her house now. You can come and visit me. Right. So, anyway, we're on this trip. We park the car at a gas station, leave my phone inside to go and get some water and come back out, right? And there's a message on my phone. There's a message on my phone. And I open it up. I don't recognize the number, but it's from Michigan somewhere. And it repeats words in a strange little cadence. It says, Can can we can we come can we come to your house and stay with you? And I was like, well, yeah, sure. You can come and be wherever I am. I'm telling this to my phone, right? So we get in the car, we drive to our motel room. I take my 2 bottles of water, I put them on the desk, and I'm going to open my suitcase. And I watch these bottles of water going across the desk go whoop, boom, whoop, boom. I was like, oh man, he was just proving to me that he was there with me. And when I got home, he came with me and he stayed in the house for several months. We worked together for almost a year. And then he said, okay, we're done. You need to go back and work with your other teachers.
Mm.
And that was that. I was like, okay. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
That's really important. It's beautiful what you say. Um, because, we are commonly, humans are used to single valued thinking, right? Something's either good or bad. It's either this or that, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the time it's like 19 things. It's not one thing at all. Right?
Right.
This is just a flaw in the way we evaluate identity or quality or character.
Right.
Why do you think we come to human incarnation?
Oh, I knew this was coming. uh, I've been asking myself the same question because I'm working on a book on our soul contract,
Mm,
and I'm creating questions to ask yourself as you're writing about your soul contract. that are based on material found in the three major books of the afterlife in the Egyptian tradition. So the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And that's the ultimate question. Why? Why are we here?
Mm.
And the answer that I've been coming up with is to have a relationship with the divine in a way that we cannot have when we are in another form.
Mhm.
We have been tasked with doing things that they ask us because we're their hands. So, yeah, that's what I'm coming up with. And because we're who we are, we're not always really good at it. So sometimes we have to come back and do it again. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
it's all a school, it's a learning, and we're learning for them so that they can do something too.
Mm.
So, yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I
the
think.
material layer of existence, it has purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's doing important things. The earth is doing something important. The sun is doing something important, something that's transcendental to human thought, right?
Yes,
The
yes,
same way a mother is doing something important just by adoring her children, right? Even though that's not a physical, necessarily a
right.
physical action. When I suspect that we recapitulate the history of our people in a single lifetime, right? Through as our consciousness develops, as our minds develop from childhood through adulthood, and strange things happen when we get older. It's like our body's getting older and our mind can be getting younger.
Right,
You can see there's this strange thing where the infant is ancient and the elderly person is brand new, right?
right.
Um, so there's a lot of astonishing inversions of the expected polarity. Um, okay, I realize that our time is probably
Way up.
yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
got to go and make dinner for my daughter. She's going to be home from work soon.
oh, beautiful. I love that. I hope that we may have another chance to speak again sometime soon if you're
I
open
have
to that.
really enjoyed this. You're such a great person, so easy to talk to. I really loved it. Thank you so much.
It's the same for me. I'm so honored, and it's one of the most beautiful conversations I've had in such a long time. You are an amazing spirit. Um, gosh, there's just one more thing. Is there something? What would be your message to just the people of the world? What would you say to them if they could all hear you?
Gosh, stop acting like what you do doesn't matter. It matters. All of it matters. And the most important thing is that we matter to each other. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Normandi.
Thank you.
I wish
Aaron, I
you're
really loved this.
yeah, I hope we can maybe do it again if you're open to that. Um,
Sure.
I wish you and your animals and your family and the living places there and the beings there all blessings and
Thank you. Thank you.
joyful healing and love. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I take that in. I appreciate that. Okay, well, we'll be in touch again.
I
Goodbye.
hope so. Oh, I now remember our last question. Where are the cards? You can't get them.
Oh, you have to order them from twoladies.travelco.com.
Okay.
And they're being reprinted right now because they're out of print.
Okay.
Um, and if you go to that website, you click on must have books, and it will link to this book right here, Hieroglyphic
Hmm.
Words of Power, and it will link to these cards. Here they are. Show them
Yeah,
up.
because I was trying to get a set of those yesterday and I was like, there's nowhere
Yeah,
to get them. Okay. So
this is the only set I've got.
they're being reprinted.
They're being reprinted.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Normandy. Wise dreams to you.
Thank you. And you as well. I'll see you again soon, I hope.
Me too. Okay. Bye bye for now.
Okay. Bye bye now.